Most people going through divorce in the UK believe at least one of these three things, and if you get any of them wrong, it can cost you thousands of pounds, create unnecessary stress, and in some cases leave you financially exposed years later. I speak to people in this position every single week, and the same misunderstandings come up again and again. People are not trying to make bad decisions, they're usually trying to do the right thing, but just with the wrong information. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through the three biggest divorce myths in England and Wales, explain what the law actually says, and show you what you should do instead if you want to protect yourself properly. And make sure you stay with me for myth number 2, because that's the one that shocks people the most, and it's often the one that people only discover after it's too late. Myth number 1, you need a traditional solicitor. The first big myth is this, that if you want to get divorced properly, you need to instruct a traditional high street solicitor and spend thousands of pounds. Now, I can understand why people believe that. I've been there too. Divorce is one of those things that you really don't want to get wrong because the consequences can feel huge. So you think, I better get a solicitor, that must be the safe option. And in some cases, that absolutely can be the right route. If there's domestic abuse, hidden assets, a complete refusal to cooperate, or a genuinely contested financial dispute, then yes, a traditional legal representation may be necessary. But for the majority of couples, that's not the case. They've already had the difficult conversations. They may not be the best of friends, but broadly speaking, they know what they want to do. And they've agreed what's happening with the house, the savings, the pensions, and the arrangements for the children. They don't really need to pay for someone to help them reach that agreement. They need to pay for somebody to formalise what they've already agreed. And that's where this myth starts to really cost you money. Because once two solicitors get involved, letters start going backwards and forwards, everything becomes slower, the tone can harden, and what could have been handled in a straightforward way can suddenly become more stressful and far more expensive than it needed to be. I'll give you an example. A couple agreed that they would sell the house and split the proceeds. Their arrangement was actually really straightforward, but because they thought they had to go down the traditional solicitor route, it turned into months of correspondence over points they'd already discussed and agreed. And 3 months in, they were no further forward. They'd already spent £3,000 and the wife's solicitor was estimating another £2,000 to £3,000 to finalise everything. And that's when she contacted me. You see, they thought they were doing the right thing because everyone assumes you need an expensive solicitor. But in reality, all they were paying for was more delay, stress and back and forth. If you're already in agreement, the last thing you need is to be dragged into an unnecessary conflict. What you do need is to make sure the process is handled properly. You need the paperwork done correctly, your financial position set out clearly, and whatever you've agreed properly formalised. It's not about choosing a more expensive route, it's about choosing the right route for your situation. Because if you're already in agreement, spending thousands on avoidable solicitor correspondence does not protect you more, it just costs you more. Myth number 2 is once you're divorced, all the financial ties are over. This second myth is probably the most dangerous of the three, and it catches people out because it sounds completely logical. People think, once the divorce is final, that's it, the marriage is over, surely everything is finalised, but that's not how it works. Divorce ends the marriage, it doesn't automatically end financial claims, and that's the bit many people don't realise. And the reason this matters so much is because life moves on. You might buy a new property or start a business or build up savings or your pension or receive an inheritance. But if the financial side has not been properly dealt with, those future assets can still be exposed. And there's a well-known real-life example of this, a man called Nigel Page who won the lottery years after his divorce and his ex-wife pursued a claim. He ended up agreeing to a £2 million settlement, and the reason that story gets so talked about so often is simple. It shows what can happen when financial ties haven't been properly shut down. Now, I'm not saying that every ex is going to come back years later and make a claim, but whenever I talk about this on TikTok, I get messages from people asking whether they can still make a claim against their ex's pension, property or money years after divorce, and that tells you something important. Once people realise a claim is possible, some are very quick to see what they can get. If you want proper protection, you have to deal with the financial side properly, because divorce ends the marriage, but it doesn't automatically end the financial ties. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember that. Myth 3 is if we both agree to it, the court will approve it. The third myth is that if the two of you agree to something, the court will automatically approve it. And this catches out a lot of people because they assume that if both sides are happy, that's all that matters, but it isn't. When a financial agreement is turned into a consent order, the court still has to approve it, and the court isn't there to rubber stamp whatever the two of you have agreed. The judge has to be satisfied that the agreement is fair, and if they don't think it's fair, they can ask for changes. That's where people can get into real trouble because there's so much bad advice out there. People are told they should hold out for a 70-30 split or push for 80-20, and before long they can spend thousands arguing for an outcome that sounds good to them emotionally but was never likely to be approved by a court in the first place. Now, that doesn't mean that everything should always be split 50-50 either. That's another misunderstanding. The court is looking for fairness, not a blanket formula. And fairness depends on circumstances, things like the length of the marriage, the assets available, housing needs, income, pensions, and whether there are children involved. Imagine a couple agree that one of them will walk away with almost nothing because they just want the divorce over. Or imagine the opposite. One person digs in and insists that they want a huge uneven split because someone online told them they could get it. In both cases, the real question is not whether one of them wants it or even if they both agree to it. The real question is whether a judge would look at the agreement and think it's fair. And that's why this myth is so dangerous. People can spend months, sometimes much longer, pushing for an outcome that is unrealistic from the start. They think they are fighting for what they deserve. But if a court was never likely to approve that outcome anyway, all they're really doing is spending money on a battle that was never going to end the way they hoped. Because in the end, agreements on their own is not enough. The court still has to be satisfied that the outcome is fair. And if it isn't, you can spend a lot of money fighting for something that was never likely to be approved in the first place. Most people going through divorce aren't trying to be difficult. They're just trying to make good decisions at a stressful time. But when you're relying on myths, assumptions, or bad advice, it's very easy to make decisions that cost you later, whether that's spending too much on the process, leaving financial claims open, or agreeing to something the court may not approve. That's why getting clear advice early makes such a difference. If you're currently facing or going through a divorce and you're not sure where you stand, or if you're not sure whether what you've agreed is actually fair and likely to be approved by a court, I offer a free 15-minute call where you can talk through your situation and your options. People usually come away from that call with much more clarity, more confidence, and a much better understanding of what to do next. If that sounds helpful, you can call us on 0204 530 8101 or visit easyonlinedivorce.co.uk. And if you found this video useful, subscribe to the channel because I regularly post straightforward advice to help people avoid expensive divorce mistakes.